Good morning. Welcome to Community North Baptist Church. So glad to have you with us, whether you're with us in the room or joining us online today. That's a little more of a peaceful bumper than the one that we had for the Not So Secret Sauce. So maybe it brings peace to your heart this morning. I'm not sure, but we did have a eventful week this week. Obviously it was Thanksgiving, a wonderful week for everybody. And enjoyed time with family and everything. And then yesterday, we made a trip that we would not have made except for one reason. And I love Baylor football, but I braved what we thought might have been a really rainy, cold game. Not quite as rainy and not quite as cold as we thought it was going to be. But we made a trip down to Waco yesterday for a particular reason. But we'll get to that reason in just a second, as many of you know. But we were walking along, and Andrew had a ticket that he had to pick up from a special place. And so we're walking around the stadium, and we end up running into a friend of mine who has worked at Truett Seminary. She's doing something else for Baylor. As we're walking by, she goes, "Hey, do y'all want to go on the field before the game?" And we're like, "Sure." And so she had, apparently she's responsible for the pregame activities that they had going on, and she had a family of three that wasn't able to make it, and she had 3 passes to go down, and so we got to go down on the field and watch as the band marched by, and then the anthems and the flyover and all that, and then when the Baylor line was running, they had brought us back up a tunnel. They run it towards us, and the players come by, and they yell at us to get out of the way because the Baylor line then is running to their seats, and so we get out of the way and do all of that. But as fun as that was, the main reason we were there, and I don't have a picture today, but maybe you've seen it on Facebook or we'll get it out, but was that yesterday was Carly's first game to work a Baylor football game. And so she was working with the referees, giving them water during the game. And so apparently she made it on TV a few times. Our grandnephew and niece saw her on TV and were so excited. And we were at the game, so we didn't know whether she'd made it or not, but we got messages from them that they were pumped about that and everything, and she did a great job. So despite the outcome of the game and season, that was a really cool experience, and so we were excited for Carly. So that is that from yesterday, but like I said, we would not have made that trip this weekend of all weekends had it not been for that, but we're glad we were able to be there and be a part of that. So, all right. Jumping in, though, it is Advent, and we kick off this season. We have the Advent candles. Obviously, we have the decorations, and I don't want to steal Tim's thunder for the announcements, but we are grateful to everybody that helped make this possible for the beautiful setup we have. And as you know, if you've been a part of Community North through Advent seasons, it grows. And so throughout the season, it will be more and more, and so it'll be exciting to see that, but grateful for everybody that helped do that. But we're jumping in this morning. We're doing a series that's called Worth the Wait. And so the question is this: how long have you been waiting for something to change? So maybe it's a job situation that has been draining you for months. Maybe it's a relationship that is stuck in the same pattern. Maybe it's a health issue that just won't seem to resolve. Or maybe it's something bigger. You're waiting for clarity, waiting for direction, or for God to show up in a way that you can actually see. And the hardest part is this: you don't know when or even if things are going to change. You're waiting in the dark. And we live in a culture that absolutely hates to wait. I mean, think about it. With streaming services now, you don't have to wait to watch your favorite show to the next week, except in the case of something like, Netflix decides to break your favorite show into 3 parts and release one the week of Thanksgiving and one Christmas and one New Year, or those that have decided, hey, that was really cool when we made people wait, and so we'll make them stay subscribed to our service by only doing 1 episode a week in the midst of that. But we have same-day delivery. You don't even have to wait till the next day a lot of times for things. And immediate responses, and if you send a text and you don't get a message in about 5 minutes, you're looking like, did they see it? Have they read it? Did they leave me on read? Please tell me they didn't leave me on read, and all of that. So we want instant everything, instant answers, instant results, instant transformation. And in years of ministry, I have heard numerous stories of those who have been waiting for a specific answer from God. And there have been times in my life where I've been there too, but it's that feeling of like, I feel like I'm being left behind. Everyone else is moving forward, and I'm stuck while I'm waiting for God to answer this thing. And so that's exactly how waiting feels like for us. It feels like we're losing. It feels like we're falling behind, getting left behind while everybody else is getting Amazon Prime Day shipping on their 2-day life. But here's what we're seeing and diving into this Advent season. Some of the most important things in our life require waiting. And not the active, not the passive, just like scroll through your phone while you're waiting on the next thing to happen, that kind of waiting, but active waiting, expectant waiting, purposeful waiting, the kind of waiting that actually changes us while we wait. And again, this series is called Worth the Wait because that's exactly what we're going to be discovering as we go through this series. And really, here's the bottom line for the entire series. Waiting isn't wasted time when you're waiting on God. Waiting isn't wasted time when you're waiting on God. And so today we're starting with what might be the hardest kind of waiting, which is waiting in the dark. And as much as we struggle to wait now, imagine having to wait 400 years. That's how long Israel waited in silence for God to speak. You get to the end of the Old Testament, and then they just wait. There's nothing. They wait and they wait and they wait. 4 centuries of no prophets, no word from God, just waiting. Generation after generation that is born and lives and dies without hearing God's voice. I mean, imagine it's your great, 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 great grandmother, is waiting for God to speak. And then your great, great, great grandparents, and your great, great grandparents, and your great grandparents, and all the way down to you. And you're still waiting, and you're still in the dark. And think about what that does to people. 400 years is long enough to begin to wonder if God has forgotten about you. It's long enough to start thinking, maybe the old stories that we've been told, maybe they're just stories and they're not really true. It's long enough to lose hope entirely, and yet they kept waiting. There was at least a remnant that kept waiting and kept expecting and kept believing, and they kept passing down the promise that someday, somehow, God would speak and move again. So, and then we go to Isaiah 9. That's our passage this morning, and that's actually backing up 300 years from the beginning of the period of silence. And this is how Isaiah speaks into a moment of darkness in the children of Israel's experience. Isaiah 9, starting in verse 2. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So here is the bottom line for today's message specifically. Hope shows up the brightest in the darkest moments. So let me give you some context here. Isaiah is prophesying to people that are in deep, deep darkness. The Assyrian Empire is threatening them. Exile is looming on the horizon. Everything that they've known and they've trusted in is about to collapse. Their military power, it's not enough. Their political alliances, they're falling apart. Their own leaders, they're corrupt and they're failing and they're looking around and there is no human solution in sight. And into that darkness, God speaks this promise through Isaiah. Look again at verse 2. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. Notice it doesn't say this, the people who were walking in darkness, past tense. It says the people who are walking in darkness, present tense. They're still in it, but they've seen something, a great light, not just a light, but a great light. And here's what I love about this verse. It says they are walking. They haven't stopped. They haven't given up. They're still moving forward, even though they can't see where they're going. That is active waiting. It's expectant waiting, and it's the kind of waiting that God calls us to. Then Isaiah gives them the promise, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And this is what we claim to this as the Christmas promise, right? But Isaiah says it 700 years before it comes to pass. 700 years before the light fully shows up. And the people Isaiah is speaking to, they are going to die before they see the promise fulfilled. Their kids are going to die before they see the promise fulfilled. Their grandkids aren't going to live to see the promise completely fulfilled. Generation after generation after generation will live and die still waiting for this child to be born. And yet Isaiah says the light has dawned. Not will dawn someday, but has dawned. It has already begun. And then you look at the names that are given in verse 6, the names given to the child. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. They're not just nice titles. They're answers to Israel's darkness. Look at it this way. They need counsel. They're confused. They don't know what to do. And what do they get? They get Wonderful Counselor. They need power. They're weak. They're threatened. They're vulnerable. And they get Mighty God. They need a father figure because their leaders keep failing them, and the people who are supposed to protect them keep letting them down, and they're getting Everlasting Father. And they need peace in the midst of war and chaos and constant threat, and they get the Prince of Peace. It's not just hope as an idea. It's not just hang in there and eventually it will get better. This is hope born as a person, a child who will be born, a son who will be given. And here's what's crucial for us to understand. The same God who made this promise to Israel then is the God who kept it. 700 years later, the baby is born in Bethlehem. The light shows up. God keeps his promises. But let's look at verse 2 just one more time here. Again, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has come. And again, why does it say a great light and not just a light? Because when you have been in darkness long enough, you need more than just a candle. You need more than just a flashlight. You need the sun to come up. You need a great light, and that's exactly what God promises in that moment. And again, it says they're walking in darkness. They haven't stopped moving. That's so important. And again, waiting in the dark doesn't mean just sitting still. It doesn't mean giving up. It means you keep putting one foot in front of the other even when you can't see the path. Even when you don't know where you're going, even when it feels pointless, you keep waiting actively. And think about what it takes to walk when you can't, to keep walking when you can't see. And many of us have had this experience literally. I don't know about y'all, but maybe you had a power outage this week. We had some pretty intense storms come through, and you're walking in the dark, or maybe at night, and you're walking out to your car in a dark parking lot or whatever. You move a little bit more slowly. You're a little bit more careful. You reach out for things that are familiar to kind of help guide you through, but you keep moving. And that's what faith looks like in the dark. You keep moving even when you can't see clearly. And again, the light has dawned, not will dawn, but has dawned. It has already begun. And here's what we often miss about God's promises. We think the promise is about the destination, when it's fulfilled, when it comes to pass. But God's promises start working the moment that he speaks them. The moment that Isaiah spoke these words, hope entered into the darkness. The moment the promise was made, the light began to dawn. It wasn't fully there yet, but it had already begun. And that's what Advent is about. It's about living in the already, but the not yet. The light has dawned, Jesus came, but the light hasn't fully arrived because Jesus is going to come again. We're waiting, but we're not waiting in hopelessness. We're waiting with the dawn already breaking on the horizon. So what does that mean for us when we're in the dark seasons of life? What do we do when we're waiting and waiting and waiting and we can't see any sign that the change is coming? Well, here is kind of your main to-do for this week. Name your darkness and look for the light. Name your darkness and look for the light. Here's 3 specific actions that go along with that. The first one is this: write down what you're waiting for right now. Don't just think about it, write it down. And I don't care if it's a journal, if it's a napkin, if it's on your phone, wherever you do it, just actually write the thing down. Because maybe it's a relationship that needs healing. Maybe it's a financial breakthrough. Maybe it's clarity about your future. Maybe it's healing, whether that's physical, emotional, or spiritual. Maybe you're waiting for a prodigal child to come home. Maybe you're waiting on a job opportunity. Maybe you're waiting to meet someone. Maybe you're waiting for God to make sense of something that just feels senseless right now. Or maybe you have someone that you've been praying for and praying for and praying for to come to know Christ, and you haven't seen any movement in that area yet. Whatever it is, write it down, name it. Because when we name our darkness, it breaks the power of its control over us. The things that we won't name are often the things that define us. So let's name it. And then second, each morning this week, maybe before you even pull out your phone, if you're like me, that's one of the first things in the morning to do is pull out the phone and look at it and just kind of jump into all the stuff that's on there. But pray this simple prayer: God, I am looking for your light today. God, I'm looking for your light today. That's it. That takes 5 seconds. But here's what happens. When we start our day looking for God's light, we train ourselves to see that God is already there and he's already at work. And so many of us are so focused on where we don't see God working that we miss what is actually happening. We're so fixated on the big breakthrough that's going to come someday that we miss the small mercies that God is giving us each and every day. And this prayer helps reorient our vision. It shifts our focus from what's missing to what's present. And again, it's like when you get a certain type of car, all of a sudden you notice that type of car everywhere you go where you hadn't really noticed it before. When we have trained ourselves to be looking for the small movements of God, we will begin to see them everywhere. And then third, keep a running list this week of the small signs of hope that you do see. Not the big miracles, but the small signs. A conversation that encourages you. A provision that you didn't expect. A moment of unexpected peace. A Bible verse that speaks to exactly where you are, just randomly happening to come along. A song on the radio that you feel like God is using to speak directly to you in that moment. Or maybe a text from a friend at exactly the right time. Write those things down, because what we'll discover is this: the light is already dawning. So we just haven't been looking for it. I've got a friend who has somebody that he's been praying for a long time. And he says, there's times where I don't see any movement and I get discouraged and whatever it is. And I'll say, God, just give me something. And he's like, it may be the smallest thing, but God will show me something there. And it's like, okay, God's still here. God's still working. But why does this matter? Why do we go through this exercise? Because hope is a practice, not just a feeling. Hope is a practice, not just a feeling. We think that hope is something that happens to us, that one day we just wake up and all of a sudden we feel hopeful. And maybe during the Advent season, that's a little bit easier for that to happen. I don't know, but that's really not how it works, though. Hope is something that we cultivate. It's something that we train ourselves in. It's a muscle that we have to exercise. And again, when we name our darkness, we're saying, I refuse to let this define me. When we look for God's light, we're saying, I believe God is working even when I can't see it. And we, again, begin to build this list of small things, of small signs of hope. We're building a record of God's faithfulness. And the thing about these records of God's faithfulness is they become the evidence that we need when we're tempted to doubt. The darkness will start to feel overwhelming, but we'll look back at the list and say, but you know what? God showed up on Tuesday, and God showed up on Wednesday, and God showed up on Thursday, so I know God is still working even though I don't feel it right now. And this list becomes our own personal book of remembrance and our own testimony of God's presence in the darkness. And again, here's what we need to know is that the same God who promised the light to Israel 700 years before it happened, before Jesus was born, is the same God who ended up sending Jesus. And the same God who kept his promise then is the same God who is making the promises to you and me now. And he keeps his promises. Every single one. It might take longer than we want. It might look different than what we expect, but he keeps his promises. Your waiting isn't wasted. The darkness that you're walking through right now, God sees it. He is not absent. He's not ignoring you. He's not punishing you. He's not teaching you a lesson by making you suffer, but he sees you. He's with you. He's already at work, and the light has already begun to dawn. And we may not see the full sunrise yet, but I can promise this: it is coming. We want instant everything. Instant streaming, instant answers, instant results. But what if waiting isn't actually the problem that we think it is? But instead, what if waiting is the place where we learn to recognize the light? This Advent, we're learning to wait. And the first lesson is this: that waiting in the dark isn't pointless when you're waiting on the light of the world. Hope shows up brightest in the darkest moments. And it's not just a nice saying, it is the story of Advent. God's people waited that 400-year period of silence, and then a child was born. Your waiting isn't wasted. So this week, name your darkness. Look for the light and keep walking, because the same God who spoke into Israel's darkness is speaking into yours, and he's saying, the light has dawned. Keep walking. I am with you, and I will keep my promises. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. May we be people who see it too. Let's pray.